George A. Romero is known for his zombie films, known for his excessive horror films.
Yeah.
Not really that known often for doing the studio system.
And big budget films.
Well, yeah. Prior to this film, he had only done Creepshow with Stephen King, but he did take another stab at studio-directed horror in 1988 with Monkey Shines, a tale about a man and his beloved creature.
I thought when I was a kid and this came out, I thought for sure this was a Stephen King story. I think because the book was probably in the bookstore next to Stephen King books. And it had the cover, which you see on the the clapping.
Skeleton Crew was the book that had the symbol monkey on it, and this movie has that right on the cover, even though there's no symbol monkey in it.
So it's kind of gonna have Stephen King vibes to it. Let's talk Monkey Shines.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
Hey, I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for finding us. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. Hey, we have a Patreon. Of course we do. Check it out for some great deals and some great content. We're going to load up some new stuff pretty soon to catch that, and an opportunity to tell us what movies we can review in the future with a shout out of your name as well. Go ahead, hit the subscribe button. That helps us out. It's a little thing you can do, but it's a big thing for us. Kyle and I are members of the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Check that out, webpage for critics reviews as well as ours. And today we're talking about another movie from 1988, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Monkey Shines.
All right. When Alan is hit by a truck and becomes a quadriplegic, he loses his will to live until he is given Ella, a service monkey trained to help him with daily tasks. But Ella's been injected with a serum that causes her to develop violent, rageful tendencies for anyone who comes between her and her precious Alan.
Okay, this is George A. Romero, also screenplay written by George A. Romero, based on the book Monkey Shines, written by Michael Stewart. Michael Stewart, this is his first novel, and the rights were sold almost right away when this book came out. He also wrote a pilot for BBC called a show called Bliss in the mid-90s, which is kind of very similar. The success wasn't really there for that show because it was very similar to X-Files. It's pretty much a team investigating supernatural murder mysteries or supernatural phenomenon, and it ran just a little too similar like X-Files. He's also written for some other things as well for pilots and television, but he hasn't really gone back to books.
And his book, Monkey Shines, I found very difficult to get a copy of. I was looking for it earlier in the week, and I could not grasp it and bring it. I'm sure they float around there.
It was a big seller. I remember as a kid in like mid-'80s, it was next to like Stephen King and Dean Koontz books. It was prominent everywhere.
It's almost like some of those, I'm not going to fault it by saying smaller writers, some of those kind of like lesser known genre writers, though, would have their films, when it becomes a film based on your book, then your book almost disappears. It happened with the Howling books. It happens with the one that became Bad Moon. Like all these great horror novels just disappear because there's a film.
Yeah, and I remember like a lot of the toys were selling at the time, the monkey, and you could clap the cymbals. And this is before the movie came out. Really interesting that they almost like a campaign for the movie before the movie came out. Probably because when the movie came out, we're like, has it happened yet? What the heck? Right, yeah. Okay, so this stars Jason Bongi, interesting life. He actually knew, I just talked about X-Files. Him knew David Duchovny from college.
Yeah, if you guys are fans of David Duchovny's show Californication, Jason Bagg actually appears in that film.
Really?
Or in that show multiple times. He plays the alcoholic professor that basically goes off the deep end, and David Duchovny's character has to take over his writing class. You see a whole lot of new Jason Bagg in that show. So get ready for that. Standing up, tucking back, doing all sorts of things.
Because you see a lot of him, too, in the beginning before he gets back in the chair.
That's fair, yeah.
And this is also another movie with John Packnow after we see him in To Live and Die in L.A.
Yeah, he had a rough time at the end of the 80s. Not for the film's success, but like just in general, living through some things.
Especially, yeah. There's also, this shows Stanley Tucci with some hair.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know if I realized it was Stanley Tucci when I saw the film the first time about 10 years ago. I don't think I even noticed it.
Well, he wasn't really known a person that you recognize in the 80s. He was still doing commercials at the time, too. But another person, a female, Kate McNeil, we know from her from Soaps. And then she went on to do some other numerous TV appearances, peppered in if you want to look up. But when I was watching it, my wife, I go, you know what that person? She goes, oh yeah, I remember her. She was that from that, As the World Turns, yeah.
She has some really funny stuff. If you've ever seen In Search of Darkness, she has some funny stories about the making of this film, working with the monkey and the sex scene and everything. So,
okay. All right, so we'll get into it a little bit after that entire cast, but we haven't gone all through the entire cast. But let's talk about that. Tom Savini, of course, is another movie with him with George Romero. This is a great kind of team up because he had to make some of the puppets, monkey puppets for George Romero for this movie.
Yeah, it's surprising because you can't. I had trouble figuring out if
Which
there
one?
was a puppet in the film because it's very low key. They do they do a really good job of making that monkey on display where you're not seeing like the gears turning or anything acting weird there. So
right, wonderful job with Tom Savini in this movie. Cinematography is by James A. Contier. He was pretty much a lot of crew assignments for big movies like Superman and stuff, and this is his first time doing cinematography for a film. If you want to look up James Contier's career, it's kind of peppered in with a lot of experiences doing big production, but also has directed a few episodes for television as well.
yeah, I think he did some Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I thought it was really funny that
He did a lot with Joss Whedon.
Yeah, I thought it was funny that Contner actually did cinematography work for the 1986 film Heat with Burt Reynolds, and then we also had
that movie Heat.
We also had an editor for this film that worked on the 1995 film Heat.
Yeah.
With Al Pacino. So we've got some real hot stuff happening behind the scenes of this film.
So if you get clarified, yes. Okay, editing. One of the best editors you ever find. Actually worked a lot with George A. Romero. That is Pat Buba. Pascali, but he's nicknamed Pat. He's not with us anymore, but he edited like Knight Rider, Creepshow, Day of the Dead, The Dark Half. We love The Dark Half.
I've never seen The Dark Half.
Oh my God.
I don't know if I love it.
Okay. Striking Distance, and we're talking about Heat. Michael Mann's Heat. He edited. Wonderful editor. I think if you're one of those people like George A. Romero who shoots movies quick and fast but needs somebody to clean them up, you get this guy.
Yep. If you ever followed me for any amount of time, you know that my absolute reverence for the film Day of the Dead from 1985. I think it is a perfect movie, and part of that is because of the tremendous editing job where it never gets too murky. It gets very murky, but it never gets too murky.
And that gets kind of what I talked about with my reviews. A lot of the pacing aspects, a lot of people were kind of film critics were kind of not really warm to with it. So you have a construct of George A. Romero doing a big production. He's used to doing cheap and fast, especially when we get the gore in there. And here's something that's completely out of his network, kind of like out of his something.
Very peculiar. I mean, it would have been peculiar for almost anyone to make this movie, but especially when you've seen the intense horror, the intense practical effects of a thing like Day of the Dead 3 years prior, or Creepshow. And
intense is the word, right?
It's such an odd thing to see George Romero's stamp on. It's a monkey, and the first half is kind of a love story, and then,
Right. I'll be interested to go back and find if Phenomenon from Dario Argento kind of inspired, because that has a monkey in it and all that stuff, and the guy is in a chair. And it's like, hey, if that's successful, we got an entire story for.
Yeah, maybe they knew Phenomena was coming, so they tried to get the rights quick so that they could get it done, and it still took 5 years.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept for a lot of stuff that came out in 1988. That this is it. I didn't know much about it other than I know the monkey's involved and he's going to do horrible things.
Well, and the trailer itself doesn't really sell the film. This film is very well known for its very unique trailer. It's got a poem in it about a man in the chair and a monkey that's his friend. It's such a cool trailer that tells you absolutely nothing about the film. And it even has the symbol monkey, which appears nowhere, instead of the actual monkey. It's an excellent trailer that tells you nothing.
So a lot of people that critiqued it at the time really used a lot of the similarities borrowing from King Kong to write their critiques to the movie. Looking back at King Kong did X, Y, and Z. This movie does this and this. And I'm going to say that's the wrong avenue to use when you're critiquing this movie. I'll get to a little more in a review. But a lot of it, if you go back to the reviews, wasn't really nice on it because they think it was just a regurgitation or a mutation of the King Kong kind of a thing. And I think they're absolutely wrong with their point of view. But going on to it, I have some little things I would like to talk when we get to my review that I will look to expose. But I think that was the wrong avenue with a lot of reviewers at the time were talking about it with it.
It's really weird to be like, it's got a monkey, so...
Right. I think that's kind of... almost lazy.
Yeah. When the film is, I mean, in the 80s especially, we had the wild animals thing going on with things like, alligator and what was orca and all these kind of like wild and crazy killer animal movies.
But
this film
domestic
feels so
monkey,
closer to Cujo, which was just a few years prior. If you're going to make any comparisons, the film does feel like a more reserved Cujo.
But that's out in the wild, and that's like a dog with rabies or something like that. Something like that. This is a trained monkey that goes off.
Yeah. But it's still, it's still a perversion of that understanding of the animal kingdom.
Yeah. So, wonderful. That's a perfect time to get to our review of Monkey Shine.
With this movie, this is the one with George A. Romero's work that I saw it about 9 years ago for the first time. And I'm not going to say I didn't like... I was just kind of like, okay on the film.
Yeah.
I thought it was okay. I've liked it a little bit more since seeing it 9 years ago. I think part of me was expecting the Night of the Living Dead Romero. Was expecting the Creepshow Romero, that filmmaker.
Yeah.
And this is a different movie. And it probably could have been different any number of ways around. The original script for this thing was 240 pages, which usually translates a page to a minute. So it would have been a 4-hour film. My God, what else was in this movie? Because it's such a peculiar film that doesn't really feel like a George Romero movie.
And I'm not really as wormed as you are to it, because it's, for me, it's one of the things, we know it's going to happen. We're waiting for that step to come in, and it takes a little bit slow to get into that, right? And, we know what's going to happen. We know it's got the cover, for God's sakes, and you're supposed to like it, and all of a sudden it does start doing things that you appreciate. I think this is kind of a mutation, not of King Kong, but of the murders of the Rue Morgue. If you remember, the killer in the Rue Morgues was a domesticated monkey that escaped and started slashing the inhabitants of the apartment. Trying to shave them or clean them, as well as, I'm spoiling the murders of the Rue Morgue if you haven't read that. But this is almost a take on that. I don't think King Kong has nothing to do with this. This is more like a variation of an update version of Murders of the Rue Morgue, where you have a trained monkey that helps you assist in daily things, but goes off.
Yeah.
It's almost borrowed from that.
But I don't think the King Kong thing is inherently incorrect. I see where they're going as the inverse of the big to the little, of the the man and woman to now the woman creature and the male that she loves. I think there's some value to it. I don't ultimately agree with it, but I think there's value to that. With a character like Ella, the whole thing has to work. The relationship has to work. That is more important than the relationship between Alan and Melanie, or Alan and his friend Jeffrey, or Alan and his mother. None of those relationships matter as much as Alan and Ella. If that doesn't work, then it doesn't work. And you can tell from the moment that they have that scene where he's in tears and he's talking to her and she hugs him, that there is an inherent love between him and this beast. And I think that's the powerful thing about the film, is how it perverts that, because the serum that she's being fed, turns her into that murderous rage monkey.
No, I understand from the perspective that all the humans are misbehaving. They're the ones misbehaving.
Yeah.
They abused Ella. She didn't want to be at this part. And then the mother is overbearing. The nurse is out of her mind. Another Nurse Ratched. They cite Nurse Ratched.
Who I believe is played by Christine Forrest, who is Romero's wife. Plays the nurse.
Right. I'm sure she had enough being on set, because I heard shooting was almost 16 hours a day. But you have a wonderful that all the humans are being animalistic, and this monkey is trying to be more human than they are, showing actually empathy, compassion, and actually help him, rather than use this opportunity like, look, I'm helping you and I'm a wonderful person. And the mother, look what you've done to me. She's almost like Lady Capulet.
Yeah.
Or her daughter Juliet. Look at you're done. You hurt yourself. Look what this done to me. Almost kind of thing. I understand the concept, but it's wonderful thing that we know that throughout the whole thing that something's going to happen. And we're waiting for it. We understand, and the problem is we know George A. Romero. We're waiting for that.
Yeah, because the film does view like a novel. I mean, you can tell it's based on a book, because it does have this deliberate pace to it of plot point as it moves through.
Yeah.
Like any normal film that was not based on a book would have eliminated probably the part where he becomes paralyzed and just start with that.
Yeah.
But one thing I really did appreciate about that idea as well is that with the book Monkey Shines, you probably also know about 10 pages in pretty much how it's going to play out.
Yeah.
That didn't really ruin for me the viewing experience. I know how it's going absolutely all the way through. But the idea of that man versus nature versus man, where every person is conflicting with nature in the wrong way, and only Alan's character seems to be able to harness that within his own home, did seem to really springboard that.
Yeah, I'm glad you enjoy it. Yeah, add the comments down below if you think what you think about our different things to it. I get it. I like it. It's just not my flavor for it.
Yeah.
And I just know that I can see George A. Romero. My God, this is a book. What can we do to get him interested in the first couple of minutes? We'll have a nude scene. We'll just start with a nude scene.
We'll have a ton of nude scenes.
Just because we know before we get to the monkey is about a couple minutes, so we'll just have a nude scene. I understand the balance that you need something to entertain from a book.
Yeah, and I think the movie, unfortunately, because of what it's trying to do, it's going to win and it's going to lose, almost dependent on just how your interpretation of the scenes go. I think the finale where he gets the creature in his teeth is so silly that it kind of does reach the part of losing me. Like, that scene loses me because I believe the relationship so much that it kind of ruins it with the silliness. I think the quadriplegic sex scene didn't work for me the first time I saw the film because it was just something I'd never seen on film that way. And the second time I watched it, I was more kind of in tune to the character's emotions during that scene. It worked for me better. So I think it's a real like hit and miss kind of a film where there's scenes that push me out and then scenes that pull me back in. And it's a constant conflict I'm having with the film. I think more scenes pulled me in this time around, just barely.
And I'm the opposite.
You're just barely under?
Yeah, it's a hard pace for me because I know what's going to happen, and I don't care about the as the world turns kind of drama in the hospital. And we know if Mother's got to go a little more than just.
I hate the mother character. I'm just going to say that outright. And it's not Joyce Van Patten's fault as an actress. This is just the way the role was written. I don't know if I could come up with a list where she's not in the top 10 most annoying characters in horror of all time. She's just awful. And maybe my biggest fault with the film is that we didn't dispatch with her quick enough.
But overall, I do appreciate there's wonderful acting performances in it. I mean, you're doing a hell of a job just being in a chair and on a bed throughout the whole movie.
Yeah. I like to view the film in the construct because George's career was so based around the Living Dead films that you could almost put it on a scale as those films kind of came out of where I'd put it. And I would definitely put it with like a post Land of the Dead with like the direct-to-video sequels where it's like, I think it's one of his weaker films, bar none. But it has this little clench for me, and I think it's because he's able to pull a pretty good performance out of that monkey. Yeah.
Wonderful props to it. It's hard to work with animals. I know that's probably takes a lot of time to why it took a long shooting time is where you work with animals. But it pays off. The animal is probably the best thing about it. When she's, here's your straw, then she takes away, go to bed.
Yep.
I'm reading. No, go to bed. Or she knows the court case. Anybody know the court case? I do.
Yep. Special props as well to Frank Welker, who voices pretty much every monster ever made, for doing the voice of Ella, the various monkey sounds. I didn't realize that was an actor doing those voices, which is kind of what Frank Welker does so well. I'd looked up his work kind of on IMDb like some time ago, and I came across that fact, and I was like, he did the monkey in this? He does so many things. Thank God for Frank Welker.
Yeah. I'm going to say, like, again, I appreciate people who enjoy it. They're just not going to get it from me.
Yeah, there's a reason it's not in my personal collection. I like the film. Not enough to watch it more than once every 10 years.
And I think we expect something, and it's not the flaw to the movie, but when you have this kind of director, you kind of already expect something, like a shock value to it. Almost, you probably want to see, beginning of the movie, you want to see the experiment gone wrong where the monkey's slicing you.
The weird thing is the shock scenes are the ones that work the least for me.
Yeah.
And that's maybe the problem, the most inherent problem.
Yeah. So, what do you think of our thoughts of Monkey Shines?
Yes. Let us know your favorite non-zombie related Romero film. We don't want to make it too easy for you.
Yeah.
Down in the comment section below. And thank you guys for joining us.
I'm sure there was a lot of chain smoking on set, though.
Poor monkey for that one.
Hey, man. Of course they were.
Let us know your thoughts on the film down below. We'd love to hear about them. Thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to our top horror films of 1988 over on the Patreon. You can join now so you don't miss it when it drops. And thank you for joining me. You can find all of my film reviews, including a 9-year-old review for Monkey Shines, over at goatfilmreviews.com.
You reviewed this before again?
Yeah, it was during my first 31 days of horror. We are now doing my 10th 31 days of horror.
He's still doing it. Yeah. Yes. You got to check out his 31 Days of Horror on his webpage. What's the webpage again?
goatfilmreviews.com.
All right. Got to check that out because he gives out great reviews for horror ones. So, yeah. You can find my show, the St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts.